โมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings to you all. Today is Saturday, 12th of June. Due to the recent heavy rains, heavy winds and stormy weather, our internet connection is very weak, so we can't have a live stream today. So we are recording this talk and we'll put it on to Facebook or YouTube later. So yet again, more changing conditions, reminding us that this world is an imperfect place. The weather is ultimately uncontrollable by humans. One minute you've got bushfires, the next you've got flooding, wild weather, strong winds, trees falling, flash floods. That's the way the world is. So it's reminding us of the truth that the physical world goes according to causes and conditions, and that's teaching us something, even though the outcome can sometimes be deadly and certainly bring us a lot of pain, suffering, damage to property, and even people lose their life. So at the moment in Victoria, unfortunately a few people have lost their lives in the floods, and some people have been injured with falling trees and so on. But ultimately it's a reflection, isn't it, that there are parts of life that we can't control. And yet as human beings we always seek to control. It's because we have this sense of self that we're brought up with and keep clinging to. So the Buddha encouraged us to investigate that in our life, and this is very much what Buddhist practice is about, is investigating the causes of suffering. And the Buddha noted that it's clinging to this body and mind with a sense of ownership, and then the experience which we have from through this body and mind, clinging to them also. That's where we get the real suffering of the mind. Having been born in the world, we get a certain amount of suffering and physical discomfort, heat and cold, hunger, thirst, aches and pains, illnesses and so on. These things are normal. But the suffering that the Buddha was pointing to and helping us to remedy is the suffering of the mind. Our emotional reactions to things, what we think about things, how we react to the world. And he was encouraging us to cultivate the Eightfold Noble Path as a way to skillfully respond to the world, rather than just cling to our emotions, cling to our thoughts, cling to our ideals about how the world should be and so on. So the Buddha always reminded us that somebody who trains in this Eightfold Noble Path, path of sila, so moral integrity, samadhi, developing the calm states of mind, steadiness of mind, and then panya, developing wisdom and insight. Somebody who does this, somebody who develops this, has a chance to free their mind from suffering. The well-trained mind brings happiness and freedom from stress and suffering. It's not always easy, especially at times like this when we have multiple challenges. So we have the weather, we have lockdown in Melbourne, coronavirus, as well as the ordinary problems we are already facing. Working, earning, trying to earn a living, relationships, money problems, bringing up families. There's so much we have to navigate. But the Buddha encouraged us always to come right back to ourselves, this body, this mind in the present moment, because the real source of our problem lies here, and the solution lies here too. So I encourage us to look at our minds and get used to looking and learning from our experience. And this is particularly what we learn in meditation. I mean, when we practice meditation, Buddhist meditation, we're encouraged to develop the quality of mindful awareness, sati, sampajanya, and use different meditation techniques to do that, whether it's recollection of the Buddha or mindfulness of breathing. For example, we're always coming back to developing mindfulness on our meditation object as a way to strengthen this ability to know the mind, the body in the present moment, from moment to moment. Our ability to pay attention. Because in the end, that's the only way we can really learn, and particularly learn about how suffering arises, particularly how negative emotions come up, take over the mind, and what we can do about them. If we never develop the skill of becoming mindfully aware of body and mind, then we miss out. And the experience of stress, suffering often comes up quickly and seemingly from nowhere in life. And suddenly we find that we're overwhelmed by strong emotions of fear, anxiety, or anger, or grief. And there may be something we can attribute it to, a sort of vague cause, say the weather or the loss of a loved one or fear about a disease, catching COVID or whatever. But if we're not developing mindfulness, then we're not really looking closely at how these negative emotions and the experience of suffering are really arising. And if we don't really look closely, then we don't have a good chance of changing that experience and learning to overcome it and end it, which is what we want. Because we all want to be happy and free from suffering as human beings. So the Buddha really went to the root cause of the problem and encouraged us to do the same, using the technique of the Eightfold Noble Path, the Buddhist way out of suffering, you might say. When you practice mindfulness, you're coming first of all just to pay attention to how your body and mind are in the present moment. If you're feeling good, feeling at ease, well, you know that. If you're feeling miserable, upset, you know that. If you're feeling afraid, anxious, you know that. The first step is to bring up this quality of mindfulness, which we sometimes call a non-judgmental awareness. So if we're putting attention on the breath, say, we can't help but notice how our mind is feeling at that moment. As we're paying attention to the breath, we'll also notice feelings, perceptions, thoughts coming up in the mind as we're putting attention on the breath. Anyone who's practiced meditation will know that experience. But because we're developing this quality of paying attention and knowing the breath from moment to moment, then we got something to put the mind on, even though we may be experiencing stress or we may be feeling relaxed, but we're not running after the emotional states of the mind, the thought formations coming up. We're doing the opposite. We're letting them be by putting the mind on the breath. And that might take some time before the mind really settles down on the breath. And that taking time requires effort, patient effort, and a willingness to be with whatever is coming up in the mind. And often we find that quite difficult, especially when we are feeling stress, to actually be with your state of mind or how your body feels. As you're practicing mindfulness, is quite challenging at times. So we have to trust in both our faith, our confidence in the Buddha and his method and his wisdom, trust in our own efforts, and sometimes we gain that from remembering past experience where we've practiced mindfulness and managed to bring up very good continuous state of mindfulness in the midst of whatever else is coming up in our mind. We can remember that, and that inspires us to practice again, do it again. And we also need a certain amount of patient endurance and determination, goodwill, to keep at it, to give our mind time to settle down as all these other stressful emotions and thoughts come up. But if you've done it before, that's one of the most useful perceptions to bring up. Remember times before where you've managed to establish mindfulness on the breath, cut through all the other mind states, feelings and emotions coming up. If you've done that before, remembering that gives you some energy to carry on and do it again, or at least try to do it again. And at the same time, if we practice regularly, then we get some greater understanding through that regular practice of learning to pay attention to the breath and let go of everything else. Little by little, you're seeing your own states of mind. And it's a bit like when you're traveling through the forest or the countryside, the very first time you go somewhere, everything seems new, and it might be easy to get lost and difficult to remember your way, learn your way because you're new. But if you keep going regularly to that place over that same route that you've been before, you gradually get to know the landmarks and become more familiar, and that can help you to get to your destination quickly and without too many troubles. And the same when we practice meditation. If you practice mindfulness of breathing regularly, it doesn't mean to say you'll always be peaceful, you'll always have good mindfulness and awareness, but you will be learning, coming to understand your own habits of mind, your own personality and character. And as I said, mindfulness is this non-judgmental awareness. It's just knowing things as they are, good or bad, right or wrong, to your liking or to your disliking. It's just knowing the feelings, knowing the state of mind, knowing the thought patterns. And practicing regularly, we get to see certain recurring themes in our thinking or recurring reactions to different events. So say you're somebody who tends towards fear or anxiety, or you're a worrier. If you practice meditation regularly, you'll be seeing that, you'll get to know that, of course, because those particular thought patterns will come up over and over again. And hopefully, through putting in your patient effort, bringing your mind to the breath, there'll be some times when you manage to stick with the breath and watch those thought patterns just fade away at that time as you're meditating. Dissolve away because you're giving more importance to the breath and the task of your meditation. And you'll get that understanding that say, for fear and anxiety, if that's what you're familiar with and used to experiencing, you'll see that disappear at that time. And that will give you a new perspective on it. You'll get to know, this is something that is impermanent. It's not there all the time. And that gives us some confidence, some strength in how to deal with our own mind, getting to see particularly how to deal with stressful thoughts or just the distracted, agitated states of mind that we normally might experience. You feel heartened, you feel encouraged when you see a certain mind state dissolve away, pass away, and your mind stays with the breath and lets go of those thoughts. And if you're mindful at that point, you know that mood of fear, anxiety, worry, greed or anger or jealousy, whatever it may have been, you've seen it disappear at that moment. You know for sure that it's impermanent. And what is impermanent can't really be a person, a being, a self. You're seeing the true nature of your own mental states and emotions, that they're impermanent, what we say conditions of mind. They have their causes. Different causes and conditions prompt feelings of fear, anxiety to come up, feelings of anger to come up, or the positive emotions, say kindness, compassion, faith, and so on. The mental states and the emotions we experience, they arise from causes and conditions. And once you're seeing the impermanent nature of your mind and the mind states, then you have an insight into the selfless nature of them, and you realize that you have a chance to, at any time in your life, to free your mind from the mental states you're experiencing, particularly the ones of suffering that oppress us and cause us so much unhappiness. So as you practice, you become to value the practice itself, give importance to the practice of developing mindfulness, clear comprehension, putting attention on the breath. And with that importance, you learn to trust it as a way to deal with particularly negative emotions that come up. It's something you can turn to when you're stressed, when you're experiencing anxiety, or a mind that is as obsessed by something and just seems to think and think and think over and over again. Whatever the problem may be, you have this method, this almost like a good friend that you can turn to. So the Buddha encouraged us to practice mindfulness meditation regularly, because it leads on to understanding and wisdom. This will help us. So Ajahn Chah used to say, there's no such thing as a bad meditation, because a lot of the times, we're not particularly peaceful yet. We're working with a mind that is not peaceful, but it's that wholesome effort, we call it the noble effort, that we put into our practice that's the important thing. We're cultivating that, and those inner qualities, the qualities of strength of mind, endurance, mindfulness, patience, faith, and ultimately wisdom. You're cultivating those efforts, and there's no way around it. You have to cultivate them through effort, through practice. But little by little, they will grow, and the understanding grows. And so there's no such thing as a bad meditation. It's never a waste of time to put effort into this. You always get at least something from your meditation. At the very least, you're checking in with your state of mind as you practice. So Ajahn Chah used to say, it's like food. Say, as Buddhist monks, we go out on alms round, and every day that's the way we earn our livelihood. And some days we meet a lot of people, and they're very generous and give us a lot of food. Other days you might not meet many people at all, or the people you meet don't have much to share with you and you get very little food. So some days you might even get just plain rice, for example. And Ajahn Chah used to say, well, meditation is the same. Some days you might meditate and your mindfulness and your effort is strong, and your mindfulness becomes quite strong, and you may even attain a state of calm and samadhi where you've dropped all your attachments and all the different thoughts and emotions. That's like a day when you get your food, the full meal. And then there are some days when you don't. There's some days when it's just effort but doesn't seem to bear much fruit. Mind is still all over the place, feeling sleepy or thinking too much. So that's like the day that you only get plain rice. But you can survive on plain rice. It's better than nothing. It's not that you have no food at all, you're not starving, it's just you don't have a full delicious meal, you just have plain rice, but you can get by on that. That's the meditations where you don't yet experience great peace or great letting go yet, but you can still survive on that. And you may learn certain other things from it. You learning to be patient with your own distracted or agitated state of mind is of great value to us in our life. You're learning how to be patient with not getting what you want, you might say, is one of life's most important skills to learn. Because where do the negative emotions, the sufferings of life come from? Well, much of it is from not getting what you want and having to be with what you don't want. And this is what the Buddha called dukkha. We all want comfort and convenience and to get everything the way we like. So when you face storms that lead to power cuts, or the phone signal is gone, or the roads is flooded, or you can't go out because it's locked down, and so on. You're experiencing multiple times, multiple situations where you're not getting what you want. It's quite natural to feel frustrated, fed up. What the unenlightened mind, the untrained mind tends to do at that point is blame somebody. So, if we can pin it on a person, we'll blame the government or our neighbour, or we'll blame someone in our family, or we'll blame ourselves even, or we just blame life and say, life is terrible, I wish I was never born, etc. That's what the unenlightened mind does. It just goes straight to negativity. It has the frustration of not getting what it wants, backed by an expectation that it should be getting what it wants. And that combines to bring up a feeling of displeasure, discontent, anger, full-blown rage. It ranges from the very minor irritation up to the full-blown rage, ready to start World War III because I can't get my internet going. You'll experience suffering in many ranges depending on the situation, but these really, in a way, are the way at the times the Buddha said this is where you can learn from your experience. You can, Ajahn Chah again used to say, when you're experiencing the suffering of not getting what you want, put your hands up and say thank you. Because for one who is learning about the mind, who is interested in training the mind to overcome and ultimately remove suffering as an experience, this is where you learn. If everything is fine and okay, well, you don't learn much. If everything is going the way you want, we become complacent. When we get everything we want, people treat us nicely, we get everything we like, just how we like, we remain a little bit complacent, dull to the world because we're getting what we like. It's actually the suffering, the frustrations that come up naturally in our day are where we learn, if we are taking them as lessons to be learned from. So don't shy away from having to face a bit of suffering, and that's why when we do practice meditation, develop the good attitude as you come into your meditation and practice mindfulness. Yes, there'll be some pain in your knee or your back perhaps. Yes, your mind won't settle down immediately. You have many thoughts and emotions coming up. Unpleasant memories, fears about the future. Yes, there may be distractions, noise, cold. The monks here in the monastery have been meditating in the cold the last few days because there's been no power. Whatever, there will be some unpleasant experiences you have to face. But if you can see them as teachings, everything is teaching us. It doesn't have to be an ultimate obstacle to your happiness. It can be the food, the nourishment for your growing understanding of the way things are and how to let go of your negative reactions. You notice when we're mindful, the mind is aware in the present moment, and if it's continuously aware, it gives you that ability to just hold your experience for a moment, to pause, press the pause button, say, and consider what is going on. Give wise consideration to the feeling in the body, the mental state arising, the thought, the memory. When you're mindful and continuously mindful, you have a chance to see and know things as they are, and then you have the chance to gauge and choose your responses to the situation you're in. you're more self-controlled, and you're more able to choose a wise or a response that will not lead to more suffering. And that is the goal, is to turn everything into the Dhamma, into the truth, by using mindfulness as a vehicle to support wisdom, insight, wise reflection, and ultimately just seeing the way things are, that everything is impermanent, unsatisfactory, not self, therefore not to be clung to as self. Mindfulness gives you that chance when you're mindful, alert, aware. You have that chance to choose your responses to things. And that won't take away all the pain of life, of course. If you're experiencing cold, wet weather, being mindful in cold, wet weather doesn't change the cold, wet weather. All it does is maybe give you enough choice to say, I'm not going to hold on to my aversion to this. I'm not going to run with the negative emotion that has been triggered by miserable weather or a tree falling across my driveway or whatever it may be. You have the choice to know what's going on, be patient with it, act responsibly, skillfully in that situation, but not run with the negativity. The word emotion comes from the root cause. It means movements of mind, things that move us. And so every day we meet experiences that move us. And some of that movement is positive, some is negative. So another way to deal with the negativity and suffering of the mind is to be one step ahead, or at least to have a plan for when negativity arises, is to move the mind in a different direction. So rather than running with the negative reactions and thoughts that have come up as you meet something that you don't like or don't want, bring up the positive emotions. So if it's anger, the Buddha encouraged us to develop loving kindness. Practice it every day, be ahead of the game, practice every morning, develop a meditation on the theme of metta, goodwill to others, karuna, compassion for others, for yourself, for others, so that when you meet with the frustration of not getting what you want, you can turn to that as a positive emotion that moves your mind in a direction that doesn't lead to suffering. The positive emotions we develop in Buddhism, particularly kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, what we call the four Brahma Viharas, because they treat the mind and they affect the mind totally differently from the negative emotions. The negative emotions we're all familiar with: fear, anger, greed and attachment, jealousy, envy. They move the mind in the way of heat. They heat the mind up, bring it to more agitation, more suffering, more despair, disappointment, depression. The positive emotions go to a place of calm, stillness, peace. They just affect the mind differently. So that's where we have a certain choice in our practice and in our life, is that if you're consciously cultivating positive emotions, not only do they bring happiness, but they also reduce the effects of the negativity that sometimes still arises. Of course, sometimes we forget ourselves, or the situation is so overwhelming that negative reactions arise. But they help to bring the mind back to a place of calm quicker, or they help to diminish or reduce the effects of the anger or the fear so that you can manage it better. So the Buddha encourages us to develop the positive emotions and to use them to counter the negative emotions, and that lies within our sphere of activity. We're the one who develops these emotions or becomes victim of our own emotions. We have that choice. Of course, it's not something you can do just like that. You have to train. And so the Buddhist path is a path of training, cultivation. And nobody likes that sometimes. Sometimes we feel lazy, or we've already trained in so many things. Why do we have to train in this? It sounds like an extra burden to us. But It's unfortunate, actually, in our world, you go to school or any kind of education facility, they don't really train you in this, how to manage your emotions, how to understand your mind, how to develop positive emotion and let go of negative emotion. Nobody teaches you that. You don't learn that at school. You don't learn it at training colleges, anything to do, any kind of on-the-job training you do, they don't really talk about that, which is a shame, because it's so useful for human beings. And ultimately it's probably the most useful thing you could learn, as well as any other skill in the world, because you may learn a skill that can get you a job, earn you your money, but if you're still getting angry or having fear or suffering, well, you can't even enjoy that money or that wealth that you earn. So these really are life skills that are absolutely essential to us as human beings if we want to progress and find true inner happiness. The other kind of practice that helps us to deal with the mind of negativity, not getting what we want, having to be with what we don't want, is the deeper wisdom of vipassana meditation, coming to see not only these mental states as impersonal, but also as impermanent, but also as impersonal, as selfless. This is ultimately, the highest kind of insight the Buddha was encouraging us to develop, is to see that much of our suffering comes from just this idea of a self that we build up through our life. And with that self-view, we have these accompanying views of how our world should be, how I want my life to be, how I want to be, who I think I am, what is good for me, what is right for me, what I like, what I want. The more we invest a sense of self in that, and without realizing, then the more we're setting ourselves up for suffering, because the world is ultimately not under our control or ownership. There will always be smaller or bigger things that niggle away at this sense of self that we've built up. The words of other people, the physical experiences of the body, bigger things like weather, the economy, and so on. There's endlessly different causes and conditions coming our way that are beyond our control, that test, challenge, and ultimately prove to us that this sense of self is a delusion. It's fake, and it's not real. It's something we believe in to our peril, because we're constantly suffering because of it. So as we develop mindfulness and the other parts of the path, it's bringing us to this point where we can see through the idea of self that we've built up, invested in this body, in our view of the world, and seeing, well, actually things are just the way they are, ultimately beyond our control. And doesn't mean to say we should become passive and not do anything. The Buddha didn't advocate that. But to see through the full sense of self that thinks it can control or own experience. Ultimately it can't. We can't control externally anybody or anything. And then even this body we can't stop from getting older every day. Sometimes it will get sick, have aches and pains, feel too cold, feel too hot, and so on, and ultimately it's going to die on us. And what kind of a self is that? So the Buddha encouraged us to really observe closely, examine the truth, and question this, deeply, especially when your mindfulness and your sense of calm improves through practice of meditation, and just when you're feeling at your ease, really question some of your own beliefs and views about life, and you'll see that they're often underlying the very experience of suffering we have. That view that I'm in charge and I want everything to go the way I want. And so of course when things don't go the way you want, we often explode with rage or feel very depressed, feel defeated by life, and so on. Nobody did that to us. Ultimately, we did it to ourselves by just keep reinvesting in this belief of self over and over again through our life, never questioning it, never examining it more closely. So ultimately it catches us out. So the Buddha encouraged us to learn how to question our experience. And when you notice that mind that says, my life should be like that, my life should be like this, I want this and I expect it to be like this, I expect it to be like that. Just be on your guard, be careful, because that is actually laying the trap for you to suddenly become caught into suffering when things don't go the way you want. Life is just the way it is, and we do our best to manage things, of course, to keep our body healthy, to manage our affairs in the world. We do our best, but ultimately we can't control everything. So there has to be letting go. That's like your safety valve, or as Ajahn Chah used to say, it's like the overflow of a dam. Like at the moment, all the dams in Victoria are filling up. All our ponds in the monastery are filling up because of endless rain. But you have a spillway or a valve or something to a release or an overflow for your dam, so that when it does fill up, when there's extreme heavy rain, then the water can flow out and the whole dam doesn't burst. It may be annoying that all this water is flowing, but at least you have some way of releasing it. That seeing things are just the way they are, ultimately you can't control, you can't make them the way you want. That's your release valve. Rather than your mind bursting with disappointment, despair, anguish at not getting what you want, not having the world that you want, you realize actually letting go and accepting the way things are releases all that suffering. So water teaches a lot of things. You see, water is always moving. That's another reflection. The world is always changing. When you really see that on a deep level, the changes of the world, the changes of weather, changes of your body, the changes of your life, you see that deeply on a deep level and accept it in your heart, your mind goes peaceful. And you can still carry on doing the things you're doing, but this is the way things are. And you can see that what is subject to change is not a self. It's like it's water, that washes away down into the river and down into the ocean. Gallons and gallons of water coming down from the skies the last few days. It's both flowing, it's impermanent, but it's not a self or to be grasped at as a self. It's just the way it is. So at the moment we have too much rain. Some years we have drought, not enough rain, and that's just the way it is. Or it could be in our own life. Some years we earn a lot of money, and other years there's a bit of a drought and we're feeling really poor. Some years there seems to be success in our job, in our relationships, in what we're doing. Then other years there's a drought and we're not successful, there's failures and nothing's happening. That's the way it is. Conditions are like that. One who can see the changing nature of conditions and the selfless nature in phenomena will be peaceful, because they know that's just the way things are. So tonight I'll leave you just with these reflections. This is a recorded talk because we're unable to live stream at the moment because of the weather conditions, but I'll wish you all well in your practice. May you continue to practice the Dhamma, and may the blessings and the power and goodness of the Buddha Dhamma Sangha guide you and protect you. May you all be safe. May you be free from suffering.